Jai Hind everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel which is explore yourselves, banking and general knowledge etc. Today I am going to describe my short story, Smiling Through Difficult Times. When every sunrise felt heavy, there was once a quiet town surrounded by green hills, flowing rivers and old banyan trees where people believed that life moved at its own gentle pace. In that peaceful place lived a young school teacher named Arjun, a man known for his warm smile, kind words, and a willingness to help anyone who crossed his path. Children adored him because he made difficult lessons easy to understand. Elderly people blessed him because he always stopped to carry their bags, and neighbors respected him because he never refused to lend a helping hand. Yet very few people knew that behind his cheerful face lived a heart carrying invisible burdens. Every morning he smiled as though life was perfect, but every night he silently wondered whether tomorrow would be any easier. His aging parents depended on him. His modest salary barely covered household expenses. Unexpected medical bills appeared almost every month, and dreams he had once cherished seemed to fade further into the distance. Still, when he stepped outside his small home, he greeted the world with a smile, believed that if he could not control his circumstances, he could at least choose the expression on his face. The year became especially difficult after a powerful storm damaged many homes, including Arjun's little house. Rainwater leaked through the cracked roof, furniture became soaked, treasured family photographs were ruined, and the teeny savings he had carefully accumulated over many years disappeared almost overnight in urgent repairs. His father required expensive treatment for a chronic illness, while his mother quietly skipped buying new clothes so that medicines could be purchased instead. Friends advised him to complain about his fate, to curse his bad luck, or to blame others for his suffering. But Arjun never allowed bitterness to become a permanent guest in his heart. He believed that sadness deserved acknowledgement but should never become the master of one's life. Whenever someone asked how he was managing, he simply replied with a gentle smile, one day at a time. Those words were not spoken because life was easy. They were spoken because hope often survives only through simple promises repeated every day. At his school, the students noticed nothing unusual because Arjun refused to let personal hardships steal the joy of learning. He decorated classrooms with colorful handmade charts, organized storytelling competitions using recycled materials, and encouraged children to laugh even when mistakes were made. A mistake is only proof that you are trying. He often reminded them, making every child feel capable instead of embarrassed. His classroom became a place where nervous children found confidence and shy students discovered their voices. Parents frequently thanked him for transforming anxious learners into enthusiastic readers, unaware that the same teacher who inspired courage in others spent sleepless nights calculating unpaid bills by candlelight during frequent power cuts. Yet somehow, every morning he arrived before everyone else, cleaned the blackboard himself, arranged the desks neatly, and welcomed each child with the same cheerful smile that had become his silent promise never to let despair spread from his own heart into the lives of innocent children. One afternoon, while returning from after school, Arjun noticed an elderly fruit seller sitting quietly beside an almost empty cart. Most of the fruits had spoiled because customers had stayed indoors during several days of heavy rain, and the old man's eyes reflected deep disappointment. Without revealing that he himself had very little money left, Arjun purchased more fruit than he actually needed and then distributed much of it among neighborhood children on his way home. The fruit seller's face brightened with gratitude and he whispered, Son, your smile has paid me more than your money. Those words stayed with Arjun throughout the evening. He realized that genuine kindness often multiplies itself in ways no one can predict. Although his own worries remained unchanged, helping someone else somehow made his burdens feel lighter. It was not because problems had disappeared, but because compassion reminded him that even difficult lives can still create moments of happiness for others. Weeks later, Arjun received disappointing news that scholarship applications for advanced teacher training had been rejected. He had dreamed of attending the program because it would have improved his qualifications and perhaps increased his future income. For several hours, he sat quietly near the riverside watching fallen leaves float away with the current, wondering whether every sincere effort was destined to end in disappointment. The temptation to surrender quietly entered his thoughts for the first time. Yet, as the sun began setting, he noticed a small child repeatedly trying to launch a paper boat into the river. Each attempt failed because gentle waves overturned it almost immediately. Instead of crying, the child carefully unfolded the wet paper, received it, and tried again with a joyful laugh. After many attempts, the teeny boat finally floated steadily downstream. Arjun smiled despite himself, realizing that perseverance often looks ordinary rather than heroic. Success rarely belongs to those who never fail. It belongs to those who continue folding new paper boats after every failure. Inspired by that simple lesson, Arjun decided to begin free evening classes for children whose families could not afford private tuition. He borrowed old benches from the village community hall, requested neighbors to donate unused books, and used an old white wall as a projection screen whenever electricity was unavailable. Word spread quickly, and within a month, more than 50 children attended regularly. Some arrived barefoot after helping their parents in nearby fields, while others came carrying younger siblings because there was no one at home to watch them. Arjun welcomed every child equally, believing education should never depend upon wealth. Although teaching additional hours left him physically exhausted, he discovered something remarkable. Every sincere smile from a child who finally understood a difficult lesson restored more energy than sleep alone could ever could. The evening classes slowly became a beacon of hope, not only for students but also for the parents who had almost abandoned their dreams of seeing their children receive a better education. Among those students was a quiet girl named Mira, whose mother worked as a tailor and whose father had passed away years earlier. Mira rarely smiled, avoided speaking in class, and often looked frightened whenever asked to answer questions. Instead of forcing her to participate, Arjun patiently encouraged her with gentle conversations after class, praising even the smallest improvements. One evening, she handed him a folded piece of paper containing a simple drawing of the classroom filled with smiling children. At the center stood Arjun with the words, "When we smile, we forget our problems too." Reading those innocent words filled his eyes with tears, yet hidden from the world of for months. He suddenly understood that smiles are not merely expressions, they can become bridges of carrying courage from one heart to another. His own smile, which he had once considered nothing more than a personal coping mechanism, had unknowingly become a source of strength for dozens of young lives observing him every day. Life, however, continued testing him relentlessly. His father's health suddenly worsened, requiring hospitalizations in a distant city. Medical expenses increased dramatically, forcing Arjun to sell the small motorcycle he relied upon for daily transportation. From then on, he walked several kilometers to school regardless of scorching summer heat or heavy monsoon rain. Some mornings he arrived soaked from head to toe, yet before entering the classroom, he always paused outside, wiped away the rainwater, straightened his clothes, and smiled. Students never saw the exhausting journey behind that familiar expressions. Colleagues occasionally wondered how he remained so cheerful despite obvious hardships, but Arjun rarely explained himself. He had learned that everyone carries invisible battles, and comparing suffering served little purpose. Instead, he focused on creating at least one positive moment every day, believing that even the darkest tunnel eventually leads toward light if one keeps moving toward with patience and quiet determinations. As months passed, the community slowly began noticing the remarkable influence of Arjun's evening classes. Children who had once struggled academically started performing exceptionally well. School attendance improved significantly, and families previously discouraged by poverty began believing that education could genuinely transform their future. Local shopkeepers voluntarily donated notebooks, retired teachers offered occasional assistance, and even busy professionals found time to deliver motivational talks during weekends. None of this had been planned. It grew naturally from one man's decision to keep smiling instead of surrendering to despair. Arjun often reflected that while pain can isolate people, hope has an extraordinary ability to gather them together. Every shared act of kindness created another reason to believe that difficult seasons never last forever. Though his own challenges remained unresolved, the growing circle of compassion around him became living proof that one determined smile can quietly inspire an entire community to stand together during life's hardest moments. When hope began to grow, the quiet transformations that had begun through Arjun's evening classes slowly spread beyond the school grounds and into every corner of the town. Families who had once spoken only about financial struggles now gathered in the evenings to discuss books, education, and the future of their children. Mothers exchanged ideas about helping youngsters develop better study habits. Fathers volunteered to repair broken benches at the community hall, and retired professionals offered to teach mathematics, science, music, and painting without accepting any payment. Arjun never claimed credit for these changes because he believed that goodness belonged to everyone who contributed to it. Whenever someone praised him, he gently redirected the appreciations toward the volunteers, reminding them that a single candle can light another without losing its own flame. Deep inside, however, he felt grateful that his own difficult journey had somehow become the starting point of something much larger than himself. It taught him that even personal suffering, when met with compassion instead of resentment, can quietly become the seed from which countless acts of kindness eventually bloom. One evening, after the classes had ended, Arjun remained seated alone inside the hall while the last rays of sunlight filtered through the old wooden windows. The silence around him was peaceful, yet his thoughts were restless. Bills remained unpaid, repairs to his house were incomplete, and his father's treatment required another round of expensive medication. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to wonder whether optimism was simply another form of denial. The questions felt heavy because they came not from weakness but from exhaustion accumulated over many months. As he studied at the empty blackboard, he remembered every smiling child who had left the classroom only minutes earlier. Their laughter still seemed to echo in the room. Slowly he realized that courage does not mean pretending everything is perfect. Courage means continuing to offer light even while walking through one's own darkness. That realization did not erase his worries, but it gave them a different meaning. Instead of becoming obstacles, they became reminders of the strength he was discovering within himself every single day. Winter arrived with crisp mornings and chilly evenings that wrapped in town in gentle mist. The community hall became colder than usual, making it uncomfortable for children to attend classes after sunset. Without discussing it publicly, Arjun began carrying an old charcoal heater from his house each afternoon so the youngest students would not shiver while studying. The heater was small and barely warmed half the room, yet the children gathered around it with cheerful conversations and eager smiles. One elderly neighbor noticed this simple arrangement and quietly donated two additional heaters. Within a week, several families contributed warm blankets, floor mats, and insulated water containers filled with hot drinking water. No announcements were made, no speeches were delivered, and no newspaper reported these small acts of generosity. They happen naturally because kindness often inspires more kindness when people witness it firsthand. Arjun watched these quiet gestures with deep gratitude, understanding that compassion spreads most effectively not through grand premises, but through ordinary people choosing to care for one another without expecting recognitions. When hope began during the annual school festival, the principal invited students to present performances reflecting the value they had learned throughout the year. Instead of choosing popular stories about kings, heroes, or magical adventures, many children independently created short plays about helping neighbors, encouraging friends, respecting elders, and smiling through adversity. One group even dramatized the story of a teacher who continued educating children despite facing personal hardships. Though they carefully avoided mentioning Arjun by name, as he watched from the audience, his eyes filled with emotions because he recognized familiar moments transformed into inspiring lessons. The applause that followed each performance belonged not merely to talented children, but to the values they had embraced. Later that evening, the principal addressed the gatherings, saying that education succeeds not only when students achieve high marks, but when they become compassionate human beings capable of lifting others during difficult times. Those words touched Arjun deeply because they reflected everything he had quietly hoped to teach, even without writing it into any lesson plan. Around the same period, Meera, the shy girl who had once struggled to speak in class, surprised everyone by participating in a district level storytelling competition. Standing confidently before a large audience, she narrated the fictional tale of a traveler who carried no money, no possessions, and no extraordinary talents except an unwavering smile that encouraged every person he met. Her voice remained steady throughout the performance, and her confidence grew stronger with each passing minute. When the results were announced, she received the first prize among hundreds of participants from neighboring schools. As she accepted the award, she dedicated it to every teacher who believes in children before they learn to believe in themselves. The audience applauded warmly while Arjun quietly stood at the back of the hall, smiling with tears of pride. Watching Mira overcome her fears reminded him that the greatest achievements are often invisible at first. Confidence grows slowly, almost unnoticed, until one day it suddenly blossoms into remarkable courage before the entire world. Not every chapter of life, however, brought encouraging news. Shortly after the competitions, Arjun learned the government planned to recognize schools in the region, creating uncertainty about teacher transfers and staffing changes. Rumors spread quickly throughout the town, leaving many educators anxious about their future postings. Some feared being separated from their families, while others worried about losing the close relationships they had built with students over many years. Arjun also felt concerns because leaving the community would mean abandoning the winning classes that had become an essential part of his life. Yet, instead of fueling speculations of panic, he encouraged his colleagues to remain patient until official decisions were announced. He reminded them that fear often grows larger when nourished by uncertainty. Although he privately struggled with the same concerns, he chose once again to become a source of calm rather than confusion. His quiet composure reassured many younger teachers who looked to him for guidance during the uncertain weeks that followed. One Sunday morning, while walking along the riverside to clear his thoughts, Arjun noticed a group of children attempting to plant small saplings on his river bank. The ground was rocky, the tools were old, and many of the saplings leaned awkwardly after being planted. Curious, he asked why they were working so hard. One cheerful boy replied that they wanted future generations to enjoy shade even if they themselves never sat beneath its trees. The answer struck Arjun with unexpected force. He joined them without hesitation, spending the entire day digging holes, carrying water, and helping secure each fragile sapling against the wind. As evening approached, the children laughed proudly while looking at their uneven rows of teeny trees. Arjun realized that meaningful work rarely produces immediate results. Just as those saplings would require years before offering shade, many acts of kindness also take time before their true impact becomes visible. The important thing is not witnessing every reward personally, but trusting that sincere efforts will eventually bear fruit for someone, somewhere, someday. As spring returned, the evening classes expanded so much that the community hall could no longer accommodate everyone comfortably. Younger children sat on the floor, older students shared benches, and volunteers often taught outside beneath the sprawling branches of an ancient banyan tree whenever the weather allowed. The open-air classroom soon developed a special charm of its own. Birds chirped overhead during lessons. Gentle breezes carried the fragrance of nearby flowers, and the setting sun painted the sky with shades of gold and crimson as the children solved mathematics problems or practiced reading aloud. Visitors from neighboring towns occasionally stopped simply to observe this unusual learning environment. Many left uninspired, carrying home new ideas for supporting education within their own communities. Arjun never imagined that a modest initiative born from personal hardships without encourage similar efforts elsewhere. Every visitor reminded him that hope, like knowledge, grows stronger whenever it is shared freely instead of being carefully guarded for personal benefit. Late one afternoon, after everyone had gone home, Arjun returned to the riverside where months earlier he had watched the child repeatedly launching a paper boat. This time he noticed something different. Along the shore stood several young trees planted during the community activity, already showing fresh green leaves despite their small size. Nearby, a group of children happily floated brightly colored paper boats downstream while laughing together. The scene felt strangely familiar, as though life itself had gently completed a quiet circle. Arjun smiled, remembering how one determined child had unknowingly taught him the value of persistence. Now many children were learning similar lessons through experiences they might never consciously remember. Standing there beneath the fading evening sky, he understood that life barely changes through dramatic miracles. More often, it transforms through countless small moments of courage, kindness, patience, and hope that gradually reshape both individuals and entire communities. Those who continue smiling through difficult times do not deny pain, they simply refuse to let pain have the final word. The arrival of summer brought long, bright days that filled with the town with energy. Late for Arjun, the season introduced another series of unexpected trials. Each further required a complicated medical procedure that would involve weeks of treatment and careful recovery. The estimated expenses exceeded anything Arjun had ever managed before, and despite years of living modestly, he simply did not have enough savings to meet the growing costs. For the first time in many months, he found himself sitting alone outside his small home late at night, start, staring at the stars while quietly wondering how much longer he could continue carrying so many responsibilities. The silence around him seemed endless, interrupted only by the distant chirping of crickets and the occasional breeze rustling through the trees. Yet, even during the lonely moment, he remembered the countless people who had unknowingly encouraged him through simple acts of kindness instead of allowing fear to consume him. He decided that tomorrow deserved the same smile he had offered every other day, not because everything was under control, but because hope had become a habit stronger than despair. The following morning, Arjun arrived at the school earlier than usual and immersed himself in preparing lessons for his students. While arranging notebooks on the desk, he noticed that several children had left handwritten thank you notes after the previous day's class. Some thanked him for helping them improve their reading, others for believing in them when they lacked confidence, and one little boy simply wrote that his school had become his favorite place because his teacher smiled every day. None of the notes mentioned academic achievements or examination marks. Instead, they spoke about encouragement, patience, and kindness. Reading those heartfelt messages reminded Arjun that people often underestimate the lasting influence of ordinary gestures. A smile offered during someone's difficult day may remain in that person's memory for years, becoming a source of strength long after the moment itself has passed. He carefully folded each note and placed them inside a small wooden box at home, deciding that whenever life felt overwhelming, he would read them again to remind himself why perseverance always mattered. News of Arjun's father's medical conditions gradually reached members of the community. Though he had never spoken publicly about his personal struggles, One afternoon, a local carpenter quietly arrived at his house carrying a beautifully crafted wooden donation box. Without making a speech or expecting recognition, the carpenter suggested placing it inside nearby shops so that anyone wishing to contribute could do so anonymously. At first, Arjun hesitated because he disliked becoming the center of attention, but the carpenter gently explained that accepting help with gratitude also allows others to opportunity to express compassion. Within days, shopkeepers, farmers, teachers, laborers, students, and even children began placing whatever they could spare into the box. Some contributions were substantial, while others of only a few coins carefully saved over several weeks. Arjun realized that generosity should never be measured by the amount given, but by the love with which it is offered. Every contribution represented someone quietly choosing kindness over indifference, proving once again that communities become strongest when people support one another without waiting to be asked. As his father's treatment progressed successfully, Arjun found himself reflecting on how differently he viewed difficulties compared to a year earlier. Once he had believed that happiness depended upon favorable circumstances, financial security, or the absence of problems. Now he understood that genuine happiness often grows quietly alongside hardship, nourished by gratitude, meaningful relationships, and the willingness to keep moving forward despite uncertainty. This new understanding subtly influenced the way he taught his students. Instead of merely explaining lessons from textbooks, he encouraged discussions about resilience, honesty, empathy, and emotional strength. He reminded children that intelligence becomes truly valuable when only when guided by compassion and integrity. Many students began sharing stories about helping elderly neighbors, comforting lonely classmates, or resolving disagreements peacefully at home. The classroom gradually evolved into more than a place for academic learning. It becomes a space where young minds discovered that character is built not during comfortable times but through the choices people make when life becomes difficult. One rainy afternoon, while the evening class continued beneath the shelter of the community hall, a power outage plunged the room into darkness. For several moments, the children sat quietly, unsure whether the lesson would continue. Then Arjun lit a single small oil lamp that happened to be kept nearby for emergencies. The teeny flame illuminated only small portions of the room, but it was enough for everyone sitting close to see clearly. Smiling, Arjun invited each child to light another lamp or candle from the original flame. Within minutes, the once dark hall glowed with dozens of gentle lights, each one shining because another had first shared its flames. The children watched in amazement as darkness slowly retreated without any single lamp becoming weaker. Arjun explained that kindness works exactly the same way. Encouraging someone else never reduces our own strength. Instead, it multiplies hope until an entire community becomes brighter. The lesson required no textbook, no projector, or no electricity, yet it remained one of the most memorable evenings the children would ever experienced. Months later, the uncertainty surrounding teacher transfers finally came to an end. Official announcements revealed that Arjun would remain in the same school due to the outstanding educational impact of the community learning initiatives. The news spread quickly and students celebrated with genuine excitement, decorating classrooms with handmade flowers, colorful drawings, and welcome banners, even though he had never actually left. Parents organized a modest gatherings to express their appreciations, insisting that the celebration was not about one individual but about preserving the spirit of hope that had transformed so many lives. During this event, several former students returned from colleges and universities to share how Arjun's encouragement had inspired them to pursue higher education despite financial hardship. Listening to their stories, Arjun felt deeply humbled because he had never realized how far the ripple effects of simple encouragement had traveled. A few kind words spoken years earlier had quietly accompanied those young people through examinations, failures, successes, and countless important decisions. Among the returning students was Mira, now a confident young woman preparing to become a teacher herself. Standing before the gatherings, she shared how she had once been too frightened to speak even a few sentences aloud, believing that she would never accomplish anything meaningful. She described how one patient teacher had noticed not her weaknesses but her hidden potential, encouraging her gently until confidence replaced fear. Looking directly at Arjun, she thanked him not merely for teaching lessons but for showing that strength can wear the face of kindness. She explained that whenever life became challenging, she remembered its calm smile and reminded herself that its difficult moments are temporary, while courage developed during those moments lasts a lifetime. Her words moved everyone present because they revealed something profound. The greatest teachers are remembered not only for the knowledge but they share, but for the hope they awaken in the hearts of those they guide. Year passed, and the small town continued growing in quiet yet meaningful ways. The evening classes eventually expanded into a permanent community learning center supported entirely by volunteers. The teeny saplings planted beside the rivers matured into graceful trees offering cool shade to travelers, children, and elderly workers alike. Many of Arjun's former students returned during holidays to mentor younger learners, continuing the cycle of generosity that began with one man's determination to smile through adversity. Visitors often asked how such a remarkable community initiative had started, expecting stories involving wealthy sponsors, influential leaders, or elaborate government programs. Instead, the town people simply smiled and explained that everything began when one ordinary teacher chose not to let his own hardships prevent him from helping others. That simple decision gradually inspired countless additional acts of compassion until hope itself became part of the town's identity. No one could identify the exact moment when transformation occurred because it happened quietly, one kind action at a time. On a peaceful evening many years later, Arjun once again found himself standing beside the familiar river where so many important moments of his life had unfolded. The paper boats of childhood had long disappeared, replaced by sturdy bridges connecting villages on opposite banks, while the young trees had grown into magnificent giants, sheltering generations of families. As the sun slowly dipped below the horizon, painting the water with shimmering shades of orange and gold, Arjun reflected upon the countless joys and sorrows that had shaped his journey. He realized that none of his difficulties had been wasted. Every setback had taught resilience, every disappointment had deepened compassion, every sacrifice had strengthened character, and every smile offered during painful times had quietly encouraged someone else to keep believing. He understood at last that smiling through difficult times never meant ignoring grief or pretending life was easy. It meant choosing hope when despair seemed easier, choosing kindness when bitterness appeared justified, and choosing faith in tomorrow even while carrying the burdens of today. As gentle evening breezes stirred the leaves overhead, Arjun smiled once more, not because his life had been free from suffering, but because he had discovered that the human heart possesses an extraordinary ability to transform pain into purpose, hardship into wisdom, and ordinary moments into lasting inspirations for everyone fortunate enough to witness them. Disclaimer: this is a completely fictional story created solely for inspirational and entertainment purposes. All characters, places, events, and situations are imaginary, and any resemblance to actual persons, places, or incidents is purely coincidental. The story conveys themes of resilience, hope, compassion, and perseverance, and should not be interpreted as professional, medical, financial, or psychological advice. Thank you very much for your patience. Request for like, subscribe, and share.